Airfares for travels from Nigeria to other countries have seen a significant drop following the appreciation of the naira. The competition arising from an hitherto domestic airline, Airpeace's debut on the Lagos to London routes. Now, the pressure on the foreign exchange market has eased as naira on Monday appreciated to 1,340 per dollar on the parallel market, stronger than 1,408 naira 4 kobo to a dollar on the official market. This represents an 8.21% gain against the dollar. Meanwhile, foreign airlines operating in Nigeria have begun to unblock their low-priced fares on Nigerian routes as the Central Bank of Nigeria completes the payments of about $7 billion of backlog, which includes over $700 million unremitted ticket revenue. This morning, Sean Mendis, an aviation consultant, joins me for this conversation. Sean Mendis, it's nice to have you around.
Thanks for having me.
So, foreign airlines operating in Nigeria are unblocking their low-priced fares on Nigerian routes. The CBN has completed clearing of FX backlogs, and we see the naira also appreciating. Is it safe to say that good times are finally here for the naira and Nigeria's aviation industry?
I think it's very preliminary to start saying that. I think the main issue with the naira has been that it is still volatile. When you say it's appreciating, but an 8% shift, whether it's an appreciation or a depreciation, is not something that gives business a lot of confidence in terms of making their plans for costs and revenues. What has really helped the aviation market, though, is increased competition, and that is always going to be a positive. Airpeace, as you mentioned, has entered the Lagos to London market, and that far and away is the largest single market from Nigeria, as over 500,000 passengers traveled between Nigeria and the UK last year, which dwarfs Accra, which is second place at about 200,000 passengers. So when you look at that, obviously, the increase of about 25% additional capacity in that market is immediately going to have an impact upon the marginal players, the players who are fighting on price for the bottom end of the market, and consequently, I think we have seen a response from them in terms of having to reduce their fares to remain competitive.
Now, we know that the situation in the country when it comes to the naira is quite dicey as it is, but then we see that the naira has increased or appreciated by 1,200 naira. So I'd like to find out from you what the impact would be in terms of the sustainability of the airfare drop, looking at the current situation of the naira, because a lot of Nigerians are wondering if the airfare reductions will remain proportionate to the naira's strength.
I don't think you're going to see reductions significantly. I think you're probably going to see more stability. The main problem airlines have had is that the time between when they sell a ticket and when they're able to actually repatriate that money back into hard currency from naira has been so long in the last few years that a ticket that you sell when the naira is at 400 or 450, and it wasn't that long ago, it was just a few years ago that the naira was in that range, the naira is now worth 1/3 that amount. So, airlines consequently have had to hedge their bets by increasing prices in naira so that, they won't be completely out of pocket by the time the passenger travels, because you're paying for fuel when the passenger is flying, not when the passenger is buying its ticket. And I think as we see more stability in the naira, even if that stability is going to be at the 1,300, 1,400 level, you'll see airlines begin to maintain their fares rather than constantly needing to increase them. But I doubt we're going to see significant reductions. That's just the reality of the situation.
So that hurts a lot of passengers more when they hear that they're not so sure if the price would reduce, because we are looking at the issue around the Nigerian currency and also the issue around taxes. The airlines are claiming that though they have released low-cost tickets, travel agents are saying that taxes are said to be inflating the final price. And this could mean that despite the appearance of low fares, taxes attached to the fares often inflate the final cost for travelers. So is that going to be a major impediment to achieving affordable air travel price? If we can have anything that speaks to these people having some sort of encouragement in terms of the naira, and still taxes are being paid by the airlines to the Nigerian government.
Well, it's not just the Nigerian government. Governments all over the world have the impression that aviation is a light touch when it comes to taxation. So if you need to raise money or you need to make a show of being environmental, aviation tends to be the first thing that governments tend to jump on. But it absolutely is true. The taxes are extremely high in many cases. Let's use the example of Lagos to London. If you're paying 2 million naira for a ticket, of that 2 million naira, over 500,000 naira of that is going in taxes between the UK government and the Nigerian government. So about 25 to 30% of your ticket fare on a high enough price ticket is going that way. So you can only imagine that on low fare on lower fares, like say a flight between Lagos and Accra, 50-60% of that ticket is just in government taxes. And, that has a significant effect in terms of depressing demand because passengers simply cannot afford to travel. And, that again leads to a general economic downturn. So, governments have to balance their needs. Aviation is a tool to increasing economic activity and, imposing taxation on it beyond what is needed to actually run the aviation system is probably punitive and has a regressive effect.
Okay, let's talk more about the low-cost tickets. Will this new competition and this new trend lead to revenue loss for other airlines who had before now jacked up air travel fares? Or this significantly puts an end to the exploitation of passengers by foreign airlines who might be making mind-boggling revenue?
I don't think you can say that there's been exploitation. I think, if anything, foreign airlines in Nigeria feel that they are the ones being exploited because while they may be charging customers, they haven't had access to the funds that they're selling tickets at for the last few years. So foreign airlines view that Nigeria has taken advantage of them rather than the other way around. And yes, certainly the consumer has suffered, but the consumer has suffered due to poor government policy making rather than any actions on part of the airlines. Now, going forward, I think that definitely, as I mentioned when we started the show, you'll see airlines, the indirect carriers on many routes, who will wind up taking the brunt of this increased competition in the market. You're not going to see significant reductions of fares by British Airways or Virgin Atlantic between Lagos and London. Those people have the corporate travel, the business class passengers, and so forth. And, they can continue to charge their 2-3 million naira tickets, for the passengers. It's going to be the other players in the market, the Turkish Airlines, the KLMs, the Royal Air Maroc, which are now going to have a less attractive product than Airpeace's new flights between Lagos and London, for example. And consequently, in order to make themselves more attractive to passengers, you'll see promotions, you'll see lower fare buckets being opened up so that, passengers will probably wind up paying less than they were literally as recent as last month. I've looked at the fares right now, and cheap fares between Lagos and London right now are available in the 800,000 naira range, and that's for the off-peak season. Right now. In the peak season, you're still looking at fares in the 1.1 to 1.3 million range at the low ends if you're flying, in weekdays rather than weekends. And these are numbers which, just a few weeks ago, you'd be struggling to find anything below 1.3 million in the off-peak season. So definitely we've seen a reduction. I think we'll continue to see a reduction in the off-peak season. And, hopefully as Airpeace shows its reliability on this London route, if they're able to show this reliability, their track record hasn't exactly been stellar in that respect. But if they're able to do that and more people are confident to buy in advance on Airpeace flights, I think, this trend will continue and the fares to London will peg themselves below 1 million naira in the off-peak.
Okay, let's quickly talk about the issue around trapped funds that you mentioned a while ago. Now, we see that CBN recently paid off a backlog to foreign airlines. So would these payments not resolve the issue around the issue of trapped funds permanently? Or do you think that it could lead to future delays in terms of price hike, probably ticket unblocking crisis? Do you think that is a major situation that might not go away, despite the fact that we see the CBN clearing the backlogs?
I think the situation has definitely improved. When we compare where we are today versus where we are a year ago, I think airlines are definitely beginning to get a little more confidence back in the Nigerian market and their ability to repatriate funds from there. But let's not lose sight of the fact that, as I mentioned before, tickets which were sold at 400 to 500 naira exchange rates are now being repatriated at 1,200 to 1,300 per naira per dollar. So airlines have lost a huge amount of money already in this Nigerian market because of the delays of CBN in clearing their funds. Now, that's great in terms of sales going forward. And as I said, going forward, yes, there is access to liquidity right now at a much lower delay. And I think that's that's definitely going to help. But the trust between airlines and the government of Nigeria was completely shot. Nigeria had become basically an aviation failed state, and it's going to take a lot more than just a few months of available liquidity to rebuild that trust. I think the airline that was the most aggrieved by the situation was Emirates. They pulled out of the Nigeria market completely. Arguably, rumors are that they're going to be returning to Nigeria this summer. And I think something like that, and if that continues and they're satisfied that they're able to get their funds out, I think that things like that are going to be very big steps in terms of rebuilding the confidence that airlines had in Nigerian government consistent policy making and CBN's ability to ensure that liquidity is available both for the airlines directly as well as for the central banks who are doing the clearance on behalf of the airlines.
Okay, so we've talked about various internal crises. Let's scale it up a bit. Now, considering the volatility of global fuel prices, will potential fuel cost increases affect the airline's ability to maintain these low fares?
Yeah, and I don't think that's anything that's necessarily unique to the Nigerian market. Fuel is an unfortunate necessity for air transport right now until we've got electric planes, more widespread. You're going to have to fill up your aircraft with fuel to get anywhere. And as the global commodity, which is fuel, goes up in price, the airline's cost basis rises as well. Because no matter what kind of policy making each individual government will do, fuel being such a globalized commodity, you can only insulate yourself to such hikes so much. So certainly, increasing fuel price will affect airfares, not just in Nigeria, but probably throughout the world. And that's just the reality, unfortunately, of the aviation business.
Finally, Sean Mendis, before I let you go, beyond immediate cost reductions, how do you think that Nigerian travelers can leverage this situation to save on future international travel through strategic planning or probably loyalty programs?
Oh, absolutely. And, the key thing in order to get a good deal when traveling internationally is to be flexible. And that means, you shouldn't just say, oh, I need to travel on Saturday itself and I want a nonstop flight. When you are inflexible with your plans, you will wind up paying, it's a seller's market. But if you're flexible, if you're willing to connect, via Istanbul or via Amsterdam or via Casablanca, and you're willing to travel on a weekday instead of a weekend, maybe fly on an overnight flight instead of a daytime flight, things like that will always be able to give you much more opportunities to look at what's available in the market and to take advantage of promotions and sales which are out there. So if you're flexible, and again, as you say, loyalty, all airlines nowadays are pretty much offering some sort of frequent flyer miles scheme or similar. Sign up for it. You may not get your rewards on your first trip, but if you say you're traveling twice a year to London from Lagos, after maybe 2 or 3 trips, you'll have enough miles to maybe get yourself an upgrade or to get yourself a free one-way ticket or something similar. But you need to then, as the loyalty program name suggests, be loyal to one airline. So it's a little bit of a choice you have to make, whether you're going to choose to be flexible and chase the best deal each time, or whether you're going to be loyal and hope for long-term reward. So I guess each person's situation will be different, but as long as you keep these principles in mind, there are good deals that are going to be had not just this summer but going forward as well.
Okay, Sean Mendis, aviation consultant. Thank you so much. It was nice sharing this time with you.
Thank you.
Tax payments from local companies in Nigeria dropped by 15% in quarter 4 to 2023 per the National Bureau of Statistics. The CIT revenue to the federal government declined for the second consecutive quarter to 533.93 billion naira. President Bola Tinubu's petrol subsidy removal announcement led to soaring pump price and currency devaluation affecting businesses. Despite challenges, tax revenue from both local and foreign firms surged by 72.8% to 4.89 trillion naira in 2023. Technology like Tax Pro Max improved tax collection efficiency, and Nigeria's total tax incentives to companies amount to approximately 6 trillion naira annually. This morning, Abiodun Kayode-Alli, an economist and senior manager at PwC Nigeria, joins me to unpack this. It's nice having you around.
Thank you for having me, Lekan.
Okay, so how did the CIT revenue to the federal government perform in the fourth quarter of last year? And what would you say are the factors that contributed to the decline compared to the previous quarter?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. So generally, if I look at it year on year, what we've seen is that the tax authorities have actually been experiencing an increase. But there is something I need to clarify before I comment directly on the question you asked. So for the year 2023, what you would see would mostly be revenues relating to the 2022 financial year of a company because the tax laws gives a company 6 months after its financial year end to actually file their tax returns. So what you would most likely, and because most companies have a financial year end of December, so what you would most likely see in 2023 would relate to the financial period of 1st of January 2022 to 31st of December 2022. That's what you will see being recorded in 2023, right? Then now to go to your question, what typically then happens is, like I said, given the fact that most companies have a financial year end of December, what you would then see is that most of them actually make their remittances or they pay their taxes on the deadline, which happens to be the last day of the month of June, right? Then for any company that is unable to meet that deadline of June, you would see the inflow in July. Given the fact that June and July are second quarter and third quarter, so these are the periods where you see majority of the inflows, right? So that then means that probably companies that are late in complying, they are probably the ones that file probably in the fourth quarter, or few companies who have a year end of March. If their year end is March 2023, then they would have to comply in September, or they would have to comply in the fourth quarter. So for a company to come to pay its taxes in the fourth quarter, most likely that company either has a year end of June, for instance, June 2023, then it can make its payments in the fourth quarter. So these are the real reason, in summary, in a nutshell, would simply be because companies typically, few companies have their year end in the second quarter, which would then mean that their remittances would be occurring in the fourth quarter.
Okay.
That's typically what we see as the reason.
Okay, so I'd like you to equally explain the impact of President Bola Tinubu's announcement of petrol subsidy removal on the business environment in Nigeria, as was mentioned in the report.
Yeah, so like as you can, I'm sure you all know about this, that the impact of the removal of the subsidy on the 29th of May, it did come with its impact in terms of cost of production. Power in Nigeria is unstable, right? A lot of companies in the financial sector, in the manufacturing sector, even small and medium scale businesses, they have to rely on alternative sources of energy. That is diesel, petrol, right? Empowering their businesses, right? So one thing that we all know is that generally businesses struggled in terms of their operating expenses, in terms of power. So the impact of that, the removal of the subsidy, definitely impacted on them, not just in terms of power, but also in terms of transports and logistics, right? So I'll give you a good example. Look at some of these listed companies. If you go online and you check their website, you check their activities for that period of 2023, you will see an increase in costs. Dangote, for instance, there was a significant increase in the haulage expenses, about 50 billion naira. And you can think about other companies as well, the banks, the likes of the banks, in terms of their expenses, right? In terms of diesel costs, these soared high. Right. So these are some of the implications, negative implications, right? Even though it might be positive to the government in terms of revenue allocation that is being distributed among the states, for most businesses, this actually led to significant increases, given the price that petrol, most especially petrol, rose from somewhere within the range of 160 naira to a liter to somewhere within the range of 600 naira to a liter. So these are the impact on the expenses of these businesses, and it would ultimately affect their bottom line, which is their profits. Yeah, so these are some of the impacts that we can expect.
So, as at the time the president rolled out the fuel subsidy removal and enacted the regime, were there some cushionings that you were expecting that the president should have put in place? Because a couple of people felt at that time where businesses and companies were struggling, there should have been some sort of tax incentives being rolled out and the elimination of multiple taxes and some other tax laws that needed to have been amended just to help or just to give these businesses a buffer or to help them, stay afloat while this particular subsidy regime is being rolled out and we begin to see the effect in full force.
Yeah, and that's a very good one. So to be honest, yes, a lot of us do agree that there should have been alternatives put in place. Yes, we can't say that a lot of things should have been done because if you consider it, the fuel itself, it's not the end. It's you don't need the fuel to consume it as an end product. It's actually a means to an end, right? The fuel is used for transport and it's also used for power. So we do agree that the government should have put in place plans to ease transportation. And a lot has been said with respect to alternative sources of transporting individuals, with respect to the compressed natural gas that has been discussed. Some of the things that the federal government did was to remove VAT on diesel, right? To pushing the impact of those who make use of that product. Then also with respect to power, one would have expected that a lot would have been done, right, in terms of electricity distribution, but we know that's not the case, especially with respect to the grid collapse that we've been experiencing in recent times. Even apart from the subsidy removal, if you remember on the 14th of June, there was also the unification of the exchange rate, which also impacted on these businesses to the extent whereby most of businesses, popular businesses that like the likes of the MTN, the Airtel, they recorded losses coming all as a result of that devaluation of the Naira, right? So these are some of the challenges that we experienced. I do agree that the government has done something with respect to setting up if you remember, the fiscal committee and also the tax policy reform committee. I know that the government has done something with setting up that committee to look into some of the taxes that are being applied to remove most of the instances where we have multiplicity of taxes. So I know that works are currently ongoing. The committee actually, it was inaugurated on the 14th of August, sometime around then, or 8th of August. Right. I know the committee actually came up with a quick win report, which they gave to the president and was even helpful with the removal of that VAT on the diesel. And I know so many other initiatives are also coming up, especially with the removal of, you remember initially the ban that was placed. Let me just say the restriction that was placed on accessing forex to some 41 items, right?
Okay.
So these are some of the recommendations that came out from that committee. But I know more would be released subsequently. I think it's something we just have to be patient and wait for.
Interesting. So let's look at the issue sectorally. Which sectors would you say contributed the most rather, to tax revenue in Nigeria last year? According to the MBS reports, what factors would you say influenced their contributions, and how do you think they're faring now if you are to do a comparison?
And that's a fantastic question, Lekan. So based on the reports, it was expected we had the manufacturing sector contributing the highest share to companies' income tax. Then we also had the financial and insurance sector. Then we also had the ICT sector, information communication technology. And it was quite understandable if you consider the fact that look at the impact of these sectors, even from a GDP perspective, right? They were doing quite well. The manufacturing sector were doing well, especially those who were involved in fast-moving consumer goods, right? The cement, right? Dangote cement. I mean, they were doing quite well because you just have to go for these products, right? They were necessary, absolutely essential, right? Then the financial service sector was also doing well, and I believe will do well in 2023, given the fact that the monetary policy rate has been increased since 2022 from 11.5% to currently at 24.75%, right? We've seen that progressive increase. So in terms of their interest income, they will do well. And as long as their bottom line, their accounting profits are fine, and they don't have much exemptions, much incentives, they would also contribute positively in terms of tax remittances. But one thing I must say, because your question said we should juxtapose the performance of the collection
Yeah.
in 2023 with what we are going to expect for the ICT sector, especially if you look at the likes of big players like Airtel and MTN, we're not quite sure they're going to do quite well in terms of remittances. Well, they might actually also. If you look at their bottom line was significantly impacted by exchange losses, right? So from a tax perspective, even though we typically adjust for such exchange differences, it leaves to be seen. There might be instances where they might not do quite as well in terms of remittance compared to what was done in 2022. So there were some sectors that these policies actually impacted on positively. There were some sectors that it impacted on negatively. For the financial service sector, they will do quite well, right, due to the exchange gains. For the manufacturing sector, the ICT sector, maybe not quite as well as the financial service sector.
Okay, so let's look at how we can improve tax efficiency. Now, how has technology, particularly the Tax Pro Max solution introduced by the Federal Inland Revenue Service, improved tax collection efficiency and compliance in Nigeria?
Yeah, so that's a very great one that we need to touch on. So Tax Pro Max was one of the brainchild of the Federal Inland Revenue Service introduced back in 2021. One thing that this tool has done is to allow for efficiency. It has allowed for efficiency in the sense that it has reduced the time it takes for filing your tax returns as well as making payments. Back in the past, prior to the introduction of this particular technology, you would see situations whereby individuals would have to go physically to the tax offices carrying big files and big documents, right? But you can do this, you can file your tax returns right from the comfort of your home, right? Without actually visiting a physical office. That's one. Then also in terms of remittances, right? It has actually bridged the gap, right, whereby you have to interact with officials physically in making payments, right? Right now, for you to actually make payment to the tax authorities, you have to actually go through this channel. So this actually kind of reduces leakages in the system, right? So these are some of the efficiencies we've seen. Then I think one other thing that the Tax Pro Max portal has also been able to do is that back then there used to be room for judgment. You can say this advantage, it could be a pro or a con, depending on whether you're looking at it from the side of the taxpayer or the tax authority, right? Back then, when you had to pay for some certain taxes, or even in instance of non-compliance, there was this element of judgment that could be given by the tax controller in a particular office, right?
Okay.
There's the element of judgment, right? But this element of judgment is totally taken off. If a taxpayer is not compliant at a particular point in time, the platform has been automated in such a way that it actually calculates your penalties and the interest, even though this is something that we think there needs to be stakeholder consultation more into.
Okay, Abiodun Kayode-Alli, Economist and Senior Manager at PwC Nigeria, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Lekan.
The Central Bank of Kenya is seeking to raise a total of 65 billion Kenyan shillings through a reopened 2-year bond and a top sale of 5-year and 10-year bonds. The 2-year bond, expected to raise 40 billion Kenyan shillings, will be on sale until April 17. The auction for the 5-year and 10-year bonds, expected to raise 25 billion Kenyan shillings, will be closed on April 4 or earlier if the target is reached. Professor Iraki, economist, University of Nairobi, joins me to discuss this. Professor Iraki, it's nice to have you around on the show. Professor Iraki, are you there? So basically, we will be looking at the issue around the new bonds that have been reopened by the Central Bank of Kenya and what it can achieve for the country economically. And there have been questions as to if people will be tapping into this for dividends or if the Kenyan government will be able to raise the needed revenue to push its various expenditure. Professor Iraki, are you there?
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Okay, it's nice to know that you're there. Now, quickly, what insights can you provide into the Kenyan National Treasury's decision to reduce net domestic borrowing targets for the upcoming financial year and, of course, its impact on government debt management?
I think if you remember when the present government was campaigning to get into power last year, one of the key things, 2 years ago, one of the key things they were debating about is making sure that we reduce the amount of debt that the country is taking. And the government has been prolific in trying to stop that. So when the government started auctioning treasury bills and treasury bonds, and the rates were going up, the government said, no, we are not going to accept paid due at a certain interest rate. So what I see is the government trying to put its foot down and saying that due at a certain interest rate, would rather get money from another source instead of from debt. And that source happens to be, in my opinion, tax. So I think the government is becoming bold in saying that the interest rate will not go up to a certain point because it's going to become very expensive for the economy. And I think the alternative might be getting more taxes to take care of the shortfall.
Okay, but then why reopen a 2-year bond instead of simply issuing a new one? And is there a risk that the tap sale for the 5- and 10-year bonds might not reach its target of 25 billion Kenyan shillings by April 4?
I think that's the risk the government is facing because one way to attract people and make them let the government money or borrow more money from the government is to raise the interest rates. And if you look at the auctions the central bank has been having in the last few months, they have not been meeting the target because the investors in the government paper seem to know that the government is looking for money and really want money. So they are trying to, I would probably call it, twist the government to give them better interest rates. But the government is saying the interest is too high. So they are negotiating, and that's why the government is reopening these boards, hoping that they can get the same money at a lower rate. Whether that is going to happen, we can wait and see.
Now, you said that targets are not being met, but then we see the Kenyan National Treasury setting a target for net domestic borrowing for the year 2023-2024 financial year at 422.7 billion Kenyan shillings. So does that mean that this also might not be achievable?
That's an interesting question because the government had promised that they would stop borrowing from the domestic market. And that is why we ended up going to Europe. Because the thinking was that you are going to get cheaper loans in the international market than domestic market. But that's not always the case because if you remember when we repaid back the Eurobond, we found it very expensive to float another bond in the international market. So probably the government found that it is more prudent to get money in the domestic market. 400 and something billion, are they going to get that? They may get, but I'm not sure because the appetite for higher interest rate is very high. So if the government offers a higher interest rate, I think it is possible to get the 427 billion it is looking for in the domestic market. If the rate does not go up, it might be a hard target to meet.
So then, can the Central Bank of Kenya find the impetus to control interest rates from the reduced Eurobond maturity risks?
I think that is possible now because once we paid the interest, once we paid the Eurobond, the market was very exuberant. The market was very happy. That's why even the sharing has been appreciating because it is sharing up. So I think with the risk of defaulting on the Eurobond now under the hiders, I think it is now possible that the central bank will be able to control the interest rate and they go a bit down so that the cost of the foreign debt and domestic debt is not as high as expected. But we are not sure about that because there could be other headwinds. But for now, we think the central bank has built the momentum to control the interest rates.
Okay. Now, we understand that knowing how the CBK plans to use this money can offer clues about the Kenyan government's current priorities and spending plans. So tell us, how will the raised funds of about 65 billion Kenyan shillings be allocated?
I think one of the priority areas of the government happens to be the infrastructure. The government has been very keen to make sure that the infrastructure projects like the roads, the highways, the streets are taken care of. So one of the boards that has been reopened happens to be the infrastructure board. And I think that's one of the priority areas that the government is targeting. I think the other areas could be areas like education, areas like health, areas that matter to the ordinary citizens as per the manifesto of the government. But we can only wait and see when the money is raised, and hopefully it will be put into the right use.
Okay, so I'd also like to find out as regards these interest rates and all. How does the rejection of expensive investors' bids fit now into the CBK's broader strategy for managing interest rates and government debt service costs?
See, it's a question of supply and demand. The government, the investors are demanding a higher rate because they know the government wants money. The government is saying this is very high interest rate. So there's a tussle between the people who want to buy the government paper and the government that is going to be rent money. The government wants lower interest rates. The investors or the buyers of the board want high interest rates. So I think there will be that tussle. But what I suspect is going to happen is they are going to settle into a rate that is commensurate with the appetite for risk by the government and the appetite for higher interest rates by the investors. But if the government gets an alternative source of money, maybe from IMF or maybe from taxes, I think it will be able to force down the interest rates. But as long as the government now needs the money, doesn't have an alternative, it may have to bulk and accept higher rates.
Let's quickly look at the issue around risks for investors. Now, investors need to weigh factors like interest rates, as you've mentioned, market volatility, and creditworthiness of Kenyan government before making a decision. So what are the potential risks and rewards for investors considering these bonds and all these factors associated with the risks?
We must accept that once the crowd of Eurobond was gone, which was the biggest risk every investor was facing in this country, now people are seeing the market as very bullish. People are seeing the market as very positive. But I don't think the investors I can assure you the investors are very willing to come and invest in the Kenyan bonds and treasury bills because the rates are very good. So even if there are any risks in the Kenyan market, the rates are good enough to attract them. And I think the investors are feeling that the rate they are being given is commensurate with the risks they are taking. There are certain risks, political risks, but I think those have subsided. There have been risks from outside the country, like the war in. There have been risks like the war in Ukraine, the war in Gaza. There has been the problem of oil passing through the Red Sea, but those ones have generally subsided. So I don't see very big risks that that investors are afraid of. They are very confident now.
You said that you don't see risks emanating from these, but then we've seen declining interest rates in quite a while now, and some investors might just be a bit skeptical about making bids for these. Don't you think that would have a negative impact on the part of the investors who are actually looking at expectations in terms of interest rates?
Yes, I think the investors are in the market not just to give the government money, they want some certain returns. So if they feel the returns are not commensurate with the risks they are taking, even if the risks are minimal, they may not be willing to give the government money. Remember, the investors buying the government treasury bills and bonds have alternatives. And if they really think the alternatives are better than buying the government paper, they'll probably go there. But for now, I think there will be a tussle between the government and the investors as they try to look for high returns, and the government try to reduce the interest rate payment and the foreign debt. But I'm sure along the way we are going to get a balance.
Oh, finally, let's just look at it in a bit broader scope in about just a few seconds. Now, understanding how Kenya's borrowing strategy compares to its neighbors can offer valuable context for the regional economic trends. So then, how does this bond issuance by the CPK fit into the larger picture of East Africa's economic landscape?
One of the dreams of the East African community has always been that the monetary and physical policies would be synchronized so that what is happening in Kenya and the neighboring countries, the members of the East community, would be discussed at the highest level. But it's not always that way. The East African community countries don't always have the same monetary and the physical policy. So there has not been very good harmony. But if you look at the neighboring countries like Uganda and Tanzania, their interest has been going down compared with ours. And maybe that's a lesson for the Kenyan government to borrow so that our interest can go down, stimulate the economy, and we have more jobs for the Kenyan people. So I think we are still very different countries despite being within the East African community. But I hope with time there will be some harmony on monetary and physical policy.
All right. Professor X.N. Iraki, Economist, University of Nairobi, it's been a pleasure having this time shared with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you and have a good afternoon.
Yeah, and you too. And that's it on today's edition of Business Edge. Don't forget that you can visit our social media handles at News Central TV and our websites, www.newscentral.africa, while you also download our mobile app on App Store and Play Store to get all the juicy information that we have for you on a daily. I am Lekan Onabanjo. Thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.